Hey folks, Dave here. I was recently on a photography trip and I had a major gear failure that caused me to lose some photos. So I figured now was a great time for me to discuss some of my personal philosophies when it comes to gear and why variable ND filters did not make the list. A couple of weeks ago I went on a solo road trip to Raleigh, North Carolina. The purpose of my trip was to see Alexander Ovechkin shoot some goals and to see Slash play guitar. But in between those two events, I spent some time at the North Carolina Museum of Art shooting some toys. They have these nice concentric circles made by an artist called Thomas Sayer, and I was going to shoot Doc Brown in front of it. So I walked over, set up my camera, and started taking photos. And the sun was out, and there were clouds in the sky and a nice breeze. So I decided to try to get one of those long exposure streaky cloud shots. Then I went home, and then when I loaded the images onto my computer, the first one was okay, the second one okay, the third one was So the problem was that some of those images had these weird, almost opposite vignette problems going on. They had darkening in the middle, but light on the sides, and some of them had darkening on the sides and light in the middle. And I really couldn't figure out what was going on until I realized what I had used to get those shots was one of these. And what this is a variable ND filter. ND stands for neutral density, and this is basically just sunglasses for your camera. You put this in front of your lens, it makes the lens darker, and allows you to take longer exposure shots. So you get those nice streaky clouds or that smooth waterfall stuff. It allows you to take those. And I have been admiring the work of several landscape photographers, especially Dave Williams, who went up north to Scandinavia this past winter. And I decided I'd grab one of these filters and keep it in my bag. That way, when I had the opportunity to take one of these long exposure shots, I would be ready to go. And I did some research online to find out what are the good ones, what are the bad ones. Apparently, you should get glass ones and ones that don't do color casting. I got this Tiffen Variable ND filter. Apparently, Tiffen is actually good quality because they won Emmy Awards for their filters. So, you know, they don't suck at least. So this is what I got. I got this in a filter and I stuck it in my camera bag. I've been carrying it with me for the last month or two, waiting for that chance to get the shot. And at the Museum of Art, that was my chance. Regular filters, they're just sunglasses, like I said, just like sunglass material, but that goes in front of your lens. These variable ND filters, though, they basically spin. And then they get lighter. I'm not sure if you can see this. They can get lighter and then darker and then lighter and then darker. And they have on the edge here, they have like a min and a max, but you can just spin them all the way around. And the convenience of these is that you only need one of these. A lot of sets come with like multiple filters for different strengths. But you only need one of these for these, which is why I bought this one. And in the field, it seemed to work out really, really well. But it has this weird failure mode. Now, when it comes to gear, I have a certain philosophy that I follow. And one of the basic tenets of that philosophy is that I buy the gear that is good enough for my purposes. I don't necessarily buy the best gear. I don't buy the cheapest gear. I buy the gear that works for me. The only thing I require of my gear is that whatever job I ask it to do, I expect it to do it. And if it doesn't, to be able to do that job, I want it to fail in a reliable way, so I'm not surprised. If I stress it too hard, it fails, but I expect it to fail, that's okay. But this filter here has a flaw in it that made it fail in a non-predictable way. So let me demonstrate by this setup right here. What I have here is basically the same setup I had in Raleigh. I have a Sony a6000 camera. The Raleigh one was a6600, but it's the same sensor. The lens is pretty much the same, and I have that ND filter right on the end here. And I have it pointing towards my TV monitor I have in my studio, showing a pretty picture because a pleasing photo is half the point. So what I have here is this camera set up with the filter on minimum, so it should not really do any filtering of the exposure when I take my first shot. Indeed, if I take that first shot, the image looks fine. There's no degradation of the colors. Considering the fact that it's a picture of a screen, it's pretty good. It's what you'd expect. So if I lower the filter to about halfway and take the same shot, you can see that the shot is darker, which is really what you'd expect because you're basically putting sunglasses on, things get darker. So to compensate for that, I'm going to drop the exposure length by quite a bit. I was at about 1/10 of a second. Now I'm at 1 second. And I'm going to click the shutter. And that's probably a little too high exposed. So going from 1/10 of a second down to about 0.6 seconds. And there you go. Longer exposure time, roughly the same exposure, the exact type of thing you'd expect from an ND filter. So let's crank this thing all the way down to just before max, because why not? And then I'm going to vastly increase the exposure time to about, I guess, try 15 seconds. Give that a go, see what happens. Okay, so that also looks roughly the same. It took a lot longer to take the photo, but the photo is what I expect it to be. So let's crank this all the way past max and then see what happens here. Okay, so now you can start to see some of the effects of this image. The corners are starting to get overly darkened, which is part of the problem. You wouldn't expect those to be darkened, but they are. So now you can start to see part of what's going on here. So let me crank this a lot past max. So should have, while this is going, that you can control the maximum and minimum, but there is no way to, there's no stops that said this is too far for one way, this is too far the other way. So you can get yourself into this situation where the filter is not being used correctly and not even realize it. And that's where the problem lies. There is the problem right there. There is a whole bunch of banding and darkness. It's almost like an opposite vignette where the corners are bright and the middle has this big, nasty, bright strike to it. And if you look, the settings on the filter are just barely above max. Like, it's so easy to screw that up in the field, and there's no stops before it or after it. So that makes this tool, which is what it is, it's a tool for photography. It makes it unreliable. It makes it fail in an unexpected way. It has unforeseen or unusual side effects of failure, and that's just not acceptable to my workflow. So that's why this variable ND filter, gone out of my toolbox. I did go ahead though and buy a second kit of the exact same filters, but these are just straight one-shot filters. They're not variable. So this is a 6-stop ND filter, and that's all it is a 6-stop ND filter. And that way, when I put this in front of my lens, I know all I'm getting is 6 stops of filter and not these annoying side effects. That's going to make my life so much better. So thank you for following along on my philosophy about gear. And I hope that your gear works as well for you as my gear normally does for me. You don't need the best gear out there. You just need the gear that's good enough for you. And that if it's not good enough for you, that it fails your expectations in the field when you know about it, and not when you get surprised back at your home office when you're trying to process your images and it's too late. So thank you very much for following along. If you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button. If you don't like what you see here, hit that subscribe button out of spite. Subscribe out of spite. You can do it. I know you can. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.